It's hard to know where to start this morning. I think I'll start by thanking the King's Kid teachers. I'm going to move a little bit. Something's really out of whack. There we go. The last 8 or 9 weeks, I've been going into King's Kids when the kids give their money and then they go back to the class. And I've been going in for the first half and teaching the kids, and then the second half of the class, the teachers will do crafts or whatever they're going to do to follow up with what I taught on. For example, if I took a sword in there, said, how many Bible stories do y'all kids know about swords? And they will tell me, and I'll tell that Bible story, and then I'll tell all the ones on my list. And so I have about 30 up in my attic in the garage. I have about 30 different things that I have collected to bring in that are visual aids. I've got golden crowns and slings. I've got swords, and I've even got a jawbone of a donkey, and it's a real donkey's jawbone. One day I asked a whole bunch of ranchers, anybody got a dead donkey so I can get a bone off of it, get a jawbone? Everybody know, but one day Carl Ray came to me and he said, guess what? One of my donkeys died. And so he said, in about a year I'll get with you. And so he gave me a jawbone of a donkey. And so y'all know what story I told on that. But I had one visual aid that I really didn't know what to do with. I couldn't put it in the classroom. Even a 10-foot ceiling is not tall enough, so we had to do it in here. So I thought, well, we'll go ahead and just do it here for the whole congregation. And I asked when James was going to be gone, and he said had a family reunion today, so I got the chance to do it in here. And did you ever wonder how big the giant really was, that David killed? When they told you that story, I wonder how big he was. That is how big. You know how I know? Because when it was built to specifications from the Bible. And I'm going to talk about a whole lot. I'm going to talk about the armor. I'm going to talk about the weapons, how tall he is. Everything is right out of the Bible. So everybody probably knows that goes to church here who built this. Bob St. Ama built it, a man with a world of talent. If y'all don't know him, some of our new members may not know him. Bob, wave so everybody knows here. That's the guy that built this thing. And I went to him one day and I said, Bob, I need a life-size Goliath. And I meant a poster that you put up on the wall, And he's so talented, and I thought he'd just paint this beautiful Goliath. And he said, I got an idea. I'll get back with you. And in about 3 months, he called me and he said, come over to the house. And this is what he had built. And so the man is so talented, and this is so great. It comes apart in 3 pieces. The head comes off, and then they're at the waist, and then down from the waist down is the 3rd piece. There's a lot of it is styrofoam, and you can just kind of pick it up and scoot it over. We have to really keep the kids away from it because it's so light you could really knock it over easy. But we'll get into all the specifications in the lesson on Goliath. So we kind of know how big he was, but how big was David? How old was David? It's really believed that David was in his teens. I read several places and it said 13, 14, 15, so right in there. One guy said 13 to 16. So we know that he's around that age. And I asked Caden Adkins to come up because he is 14. And Caden, do you mind coming up here, please, and just stand right there by him, get an idea. Look at that. That when Goliath looked out and he saw that somebody, the challenger that's coming towards him, that's what he saw. It was a young man this age. And I'm going to read, I don't want to embarrass you or anything, Caden, but I'm going to read some things that is described in the Bible to describe David, and we'll see how it compares with Caden, okay? All right, here we go. One thing it said, he was glowing with health. You look pretty healthy with me, Caden. It says he was handsome. Check number 2, Caden. Good job. It said he was a ruddy complexion. Ruddy means reddish, a reddish complexion. Now, a lot of people believe that he had red hair because it said reddish complexion. Now, it does not say he had red hair. I want to make that clear. But millions of people believe he had red hair. And I'm going to show you some slides today of people who painted David and Goliath, the story, and nearly every one of them put David as red hair. So, do you have red hair? Kind of bend down so they can see your hair, Caden. He's got red hair. Good. One other thing it says, when Goliath saw him approaching and he looked and he was insulted. He said, I despise this guy. Said he's not much more than a boy. That's what he thought Goliath thought of him. He's not much more than a boy. Well, you can tell Caden is not a grown man, but he's sure not a little boy anymore. I mean, so he's just about a perfect volunteer for this. Caden, thank you very much for doing that. Appreciate you. I know a lot of you think that this story is for kids, and I'm telling you, it is a story for adults too. And it glorifies God, and if you listen, you'll hear it over and over and over. Listen where the power is in this story. Is it in David? Is it in where is the power? And who's got this all planned? And I mean, everything just falls together because God's glory is so great, and He controls everything. So what's close as we go through there? We're going to go ahead and get started on the story now. Starts out, King Saul is the king when all of this is happening, when the David and Goliath story. Saul was the first king, and God didn't want him to have kings. He said, you're ignoring me, I'm your king, but they said, no, all the other countries got a king, we want a king. And so he finally agreed, and he gave him Saul. Well, Saul was not, he could have been great. He had it made, but he really messed up. He had the Spirit of the Lord was on him. He had the prophet Samuel was right there to help him and to really back him and be the go-between God and him. He had it made if he had just obeyed God, but he really messed up. And I haven't got time to go into all of his sins, but it was bad enough sins that God rejected him as king, took his spirit away from him, and even Samuel left him. He just kind of abandoned him too. So Saul was on his own, and he didn't do very good, I'll tell you that. But when Samuel went to him and said, God is taking his spirit away, and don't call on me anymore, he says, God is looking for a new king, and he's going to be someone who's after my own heart, after God's own heart. And so, sure enough, God sends Samuel. And if Samuel goes to Bethlehem, and that's where Jesse lives, and he has 8 sons. And whenever Samuel presents them one at a time, and God says, no, that's not him, no, no, no. And it finally gets to David, the youngest one, the shepherd, and he chooses him. And so, excuse me just a second. Brian, if we got this program up, it's not showing down here. Okay. Thank you. Good deal. I'm going to have to turn around like this. Okay, there we go. Let's read this, what is on this slide 2 here. Read it together. Samuel 16:13. So Samuel took the horn of oil, and he anointed him in the presence of his brothers. And from that day forward, the Spirit of the Lord was powerfully on David. Really let that sink in. From the day he was anointed, the Spirit of the Lord was powerfully on David. He's a shepherd. I mean, what can a shepherd do with the power of God on him? So I think we'll find out. But y'all know that James never looks at his notes. I look at mine all the time. So when King Saul, the Spirit was taken away, God also put a harmful spirit. The one translation says God put an evil spirit on Saul. And Saul, at times, I don't know if it was sickness or pain. I don't know what it was, what the Spirit did to him, but it was bad. And his servants, Saul's servants, said, hey, you need to get somebody who can play the harp. And it's also, many places in translations, is called the lyre, L-Y-R-E, lyre. And said, we get somebody to play the harp, and it will ease your pain, you know. And I don't know where they got that, but so Saul said, we'll try it. So I'm going to go to this next slide. Make sure I'm on the right one. Yep. We're going to read this. Saul calls for someone who can play the lyre. So Saul said to his attendants, find someone who plays well and bring him to me. And one of the servants said, I have seen a son of Jesse of Bethlehem who knows how to play the lyre. He is a brave man and a warrior. He speaks well and is a fine-looking man, and the Lord is with him. I don't know how long it was from the time he was anointed to the time that this happened, but it was 4 verses in the Bible. On 13, he was anointed. Verse 17, it says, this guy says, hey, this David is a brave man, and he is a warrior. He called him a warrior. David is a shepherd. Why would he call a shepherd a warrior of what had happened? Something great had happened, or he wouldn't be calling him a warrior. And he says the Lord's with him. So sure enough, Saul says, I want you to go get him, bring him to me. And so they did bring it to him, and he started playing that harp whenever he would have this evil spirit come on him, and it helped him. So Saul really liked David a lot. And so he did keep him, and he was pleased with him. And David also became one of Saul's armor bearers, and he wasn't old enough to go to war yet, but he was an armor bearer. Somebody said, well, he probably just polished his tools, sharpened his sword and his spear, and they probably just polished his things, for him, keep it looking nice, all of his equipment. But I don't know what he did, but he was an armor bearer, one of them. Let's go to the next slide. We're getting closer to the battle. All right. I'll be reading this straight through. The Philistines gathered their forces for war. The Israelite army was on one hill, and the Philistines were on the other, with a valley in between. A champion named Goliath, who was from Gath, came out of the Philistine camp. His height was 6 cubits and a span. That means 9'9". So if you measure this guy from top to bottom, be 9'9". Then you add the helmet, and then you add the spear, and that thing's over 10.5 foot tall. But it would be pretty scary to be seeing this for somebody to want to fight him. It says he had a bronze helmet on. He wore a coat of scaled armor. I don't know if you can see it very good, but Bob, when he made this, made scaled armor. And the reason for that is Philistines had this pagan god that was half fish and half man. And so that's the reason those scales are on there. That Philistine was trying to say, hey, to this pagan god, look at me, I got on scales on my armor, I got that. So, but that's what that's all about. Then if you get up here at the wall closer, there's a little old symbol there of that pagan god. But we know there's only one God, and it's true God, and this God is going down here in a minute. We haven't got to it yet. Get ready. All right, then he had, and that armor, by the way, around his chest weighed 125 pounds, made of pure bronze. On his legs, he wore bronze greaves, and a bronze javelin was slung over his shoulder. You see the javelin? His spear shaft was like a weaver's rod, and the iron point weighed 600 shekels. That means 15 pounds. Just the spearhead on that spear weighed 15 pounds. Think how long it had to be to balance out, to throw, if you have 15 pounds of weight on the end of that. So it was amazing. Goliath stood and he shouted at the ranks of Israel, "Why do you come and line up for battles? Am I not a Philistine, and are you not the servants of Saul? Choose a man and have him come out down to me. If he is able to kill me, we will become your servants. But if I overcome him, then you will become our servants." Then he said, "This day I defy the armies of Israel. Give me a man and let us fight." On hearing the Philistines' words, Saul and all the Israelites were dismayed and terrified. It says for 40 days the Philistine came out every morning and every evening and gave this speech. Can you imagine? It says the Israelites were terrified, and I can imagine. But I don't know if it was natural because of the way he looked and how big he was. I don't know if it's God that had something to do with that, put the little terror in them. But those not one person went forward to say, Saul, I'll do it. Said they were terrified. During this time, of course, the war, David was not old enough to go to the war, so he had gone back and he was tending the sheep. And so 3 of his brothers were old enough to be in the battle up there with Saul's army. And so David, he was tending sheep, and his dad, Jesse, says, hey, we've made some food. We want you to take this food and check on your brothers. Give them the food, get a report, and bring back a report how they're doing. It's okay. So that's what gave David to the scene in the first place. So he goes and he delivers the food. And while he's there, this guy gives his speech, and he hears it. So let's go to the next slide. Okay. Let me go back to that just a second. Before we go to that slide, David hears the speech and he says, hey, this pagan, this uncircumcised pagan, why is he talking about God like that? Somebody ought to do something, you know. Hey, why isn't somebody doing something? And he says, what would happen if somebody did kill him? And they said, oh, the king said he'll be rich, number one. Number two, said he is going to get to marry the king's wife, and he doesn't have to pay taxes anymore. And so those 3, that's pretty good, but still nobody had gone forward. And he just keeps saying, why don't somebody do something about this? And a servant of Saul heard him talking and went and got him and took him to Saul. And so now we'll go to this next. David said, Saul, I'll go. Saul says, you're too young. He said, this champion, this guy has been a warrior since his youth, and you can't beat him. But first, Saul says no. But then David keeps reading, or keeps talking. Says, when a lion and a carries off one of my sheep, strike it and take him by the hair, and he will rest. Saul said, go, and the Lord be with you. That happened fast, didn't it? How many times did he mention the Lord in that just few verses there? And he's putting credit to God. He says, God saved me from those bears. God saved me from those lions. And this Philistine is no better than them. God's going to save me from these Philistines. And I don't know, just in the authority in his voice or what it was, but I mean, Saul takes the chance. Like Saul says, let's do this. I don't know if he remembered when he had the Spirit of the Lord on him. And he felt like that and had confidence and faith and giving credit to the Lord. But that he says go. So David is getting ready. He's getting close. Here we're going to 10. All right. Then he took his staff in his hand. He chose 5 smooth stones from the stream, put them in the pouch of his shepherd's bag, and with his sling in hand approached the Philistine. You know, I didn't know why he took his staff. And I had to kind of think about it, because, I mean, you'd think that'd kind of keep him, you know, it'd need both hands to really get that sling ready to go. But I just asked Siri, and then I asked Firefox, Internet, and I said, why did he take his staff too with him? And I had about 100 answers, and nearly all of them said it was kind of a distraction. It was just, you remember, whenever, we'll see here in a minute, that whenever Goliath looked down on David, he said, you're coming at me with a stick, you know. Well, he didn't even say anything about the sling. So I don't know if that was right, but it sounds good. It's a good distraction. And we'll see about that. But kids that are here, remember when I taught you how to use that sling? And I said use a smooth rock. Remember that? And when you use that smooth rock, so that sling real straight, and you can really have control. But if you have a rock that's kind of rugged, got jagged ends on it, as it comes out of that pouch, it kind of grabs and it could go anywhere. There's no control. But a good smooth rock is great. I know Joe Joyner told me at one time him and his brothers, or here him and his friends, they all had slings, and they put 10 cans up on the wall, and they all used that sling so much that they could get pretty good at knocking them cans off. I mean, so it's like a bullet going through the air when they shoot it with that sling. And okay, the last line there, he had approached the Philistine. We're getting close. Meanwhile, the Philistine with his shield bearer in front of him kept coming closer to David. He looked David over, and he saw that he was little more than a boy, glowing with health and handsome, and he despised him. Goliath said to David, am I a dog that you come to me with sticks? And he cursed David by his gods. Come here, and I'll give your flesh to the birds and the wild animals. David said, you come to me with sword and spear and javelin, but I come against you in the name of the Lord Almighty, the God of the armies of Israel, who you have defied. This day the Lord will deliver you in my hands, and I will strike you down and cut off your head. This day I will give the carcasses of the Philistine army to the birds and to the wild animals, and the whole world will know that there's a God in Israel. All those here will know that it is not by sword or spear that the Lord saves, for the battle is the Lord's, and he will give all of you into our hands. I bet Goliath, when he saw David coming, he said, this is going to be a quick battle. It's going to be over quick. But I don't think he knew what was about to hit him. It happens fast. David ran, and he stood over him. Uh-oh, wait a minute. Have I got the wrong one? Yep. So, excuse me. As the Philistine moved closer to attack him, David ran quickly towards the battle line to meet him. Reaching into his bag and taking out a stone, he slung it, and he struck the Philistine on the forehead. The stone sank in to his forehead, and he fell face down on the ground. That was a fast battle, wasn't it? Think about that, falling forward. Think about it hitting the ground face first. and think about the armies. What are they thinking? What just happened? Think about the Israel army, what they're thinking. Think about the Philistines and what they're seeing. They're thinking, no, it can't be happening. I'm going to have, our nation's going to have to be slaves to Israel, so they don't want to do that. So, but the battle's not quite over. Let's see what he does next. David ran and stood over him. He took hold of the Philistine's sword, and he drew it from the sheath. After he killed him, he cut off his head with his own sword. Real quick, I want to look at this picture real close. Look the Philistine head there, right on the forehead. It was a pagan symbol or a black diamond or something. But one of the kids in one of the classes one day said, you know what? Somebody said, what's that on his forehead? And the other kid said, that's where the rock went in. And it is. After I got a magnifying glass and looked, that's where the rock went in to Goliath's forehead in that drawing right there. And also, Caden, you got to grow your hair long. Look how you would look. You would look just like that, man. You never know. Then the men of Israel and Judah surged forward with a shout, and they pursued the Philistines to the entrance of Gath and the gates of Ekron. Their dead were strewn along with the Sharon road to Gath and Ekron. When they returned, they plundered the camp. David took the Philistine's head and brought it to Jerusalem. He put the Philistines' weapons in his own tent. Can you imagine David going back to Jerusalem and he carrying that head around? Have anybody here ever been to the Holy Lands and walked through the streets of Jerusalem? They're not avenues and big streets. There's kind of right between buildings, narrow spots for miles. And I've watched lots and lots of films and documentaries on it. And just imagine him carrying that head around with him. And even when Saul said, go get that young man, bring him to me, he was talking to Abner, the commander of all the armies. And they told Abner, bring that boy here. And so when he came, he still had that head with him. And he carried it all over the place. That is the story of David and Goliath. It is powerful. It glorifies God. It is fantastic. And there's many, many lessons we can get this for today. I'm going to read a few of the lessons that we can learn. I don't have time to go into a lot of them, but listen to these. If the first one, if you missed it, you wasn't listening. The battle is the Lord's. Now, our battles, same thing. Our battles, sickness, it doesn't matter what it is, whether it's marriage, whether it's money, whether it's problems, trouble, whatever, the battle is the Lord's. Let Him help you through it. Use His strength and not our own strength to solve it. Says use the resources we have even though they seem insignificant. Act on your convictions even if others doubt it. In the Spirit of the Lord, I have a question for you, and this is your kind of homework if you don't mind. Me and Curly, I wish Curly was here. We talked about it. The Spirit that was in David, is that the same Spirit that's in us today? And Curly said, that's a good question. And I said, I don't know. You know, if the Holy Spirit that's in us today, the same that was in David, well, go look it up. I pulled it up on the internet and I saw about 20 people said, no, it's not. And that surprised me, you know. And so I now found out some more and I want y'all to go home and look that up, think about it. It's interesting to study it. Well, I hope you enjoyed the story. I was a nervous wreck. I don't know why. I'm used to teaching kids and I'm used to teaching teens, but I'm not used to those. And there's people in here and forgot more Bible than I know. So, but I thank you. I'm glad to tell the story because it is so great for God. And thanks again to Bob for this. And we ask her, we want to thank all the King's Kids teachers, all the Tuesday school teachers, everybody just that helps, and the staff, and everybody has anything to do with those two programs that teach our kids. It is so great. Thank you all. We want to offer an invitation, and if anyone would like to come forward this morning, especially if you want to confess that Jesus is your Lord and be baptized, we love to do that. Or if you just want to come and ask for prayers, or if you have questions, issues, anything you want to talk to the elders, you can do that anytime. We'll have an open door policy anytime. But just please come while we stand and sing.